yeah, okay, so we're all interested in flow and we're all interested in breath and this movement kind of like it just feels like it's really repeating itself. Like it's in a rut. Like I don't know what to do with that kind of movement artistically. Like I don't know what it's uncovering, if anything. Going against flow was a way to break out of what I saw as like an aesthetic rut.
Welcome to the Dance Maker podcast presented by Small Plates Choreography Festival. In this series, we engage in inspiring conversations with choreographers from the Small Plates Network whose work has been showcased in our performances. Small Plates Choreography Festival is an artist-centric dance performance series designed for dance makers at all stages of their choreographic careers. We expertly curate and produce concert dance through an open application process, highlighting distinct, uncommon, and relevant short dance works in performances in several different U.S. cities each year. Our goal is to be a platform for dance makers to amplify their voices and reach, and to create a lively interface between artists and audiences exploring the creative process and the intent behind each dance. This podcast will be led by Carlye Eckert. Carlye's work is devoted to accessible, transformative arts experiences for underserved communities. Her interdisciplinary movement practice spans visual art, video, and sound, often rooted in environmental and communal encounters. She is a Juilliard-trained artist whose work has been presented internationally in many notable venues and collaborative partnerships. Her work in the field extends to educator, presenter, producer, and curator for organizations such as Dance Parade, Stuffed Arts, Chapman Steamer Arts, Newburgh Illuminated Festival, and Small Plates Choreography Festival. This podcast serves as a vehicle for conversations with dance makers about their inspiration, experiences, processes, and the deeper purpose behind their creations. We will hear from the talented choreographers of Small Plates about what draws them to dance, their creative process, and their artistic journeys. Join us as we discover how choreographic work comes to life through the eyes of the artists of Small Plates, and learn where you can engage further with them and with their performances.
Hello, I'm Carlye Eckert, and I'm here with Meghan Frederick of Meghan Frederick Practice Project. And you are listening to the Small Plates Choreography Festival podcast. And Meghan is here with us as a past Small Plates Choreography Festival artist. Most recently, she performed her work After Yes at Chapman Steamer Arts in Newburgh, New York, this past November 2nd, 2024. And she's here with us to talk about her practice and her work. Hello, Meghan.
Hi, Carly.
How's it going over there? You're in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, I'm based in Philadelphia now since 2018.
Wonderful. And before that, you were in New York City.
Yes, I was in New York City from 2008 to 2018, where I spent a good deal of time with you.
Yes, full disclosure, the two of us are friends and have worked together in multiple capacities in each other's work. And then also with Brian Brooks Moving Company based in New York City for many years as dancers. I mean, I think, it'd be great for people to get just a little bit of background on you, but I would love to, maybe we can start at that moment where you left New York City and you've moved to Philadelphia. I know that a lot happened during that time, but, using that as a starting point and kind of contextualizing how that move and your time in Philadelphia has shaped your practice and your work for the last many years.
Yeah, it has been many years, and it feels, I think we all know that time has functioned very strangely recently. I left New York in 2018 when I was pregnant with my first child, and I had her in Philadelphia and was kind of feeling, a little unmoored and what am I going to do? So I actually entered the MFA program at Temple University, and I started that program when she was about 10 months old, and she was in daycare, and I got through the first, almost the first year, obviously, and then COVID happened and everything stopped. I went from doing an MFA program at Temple to doing an MFA program in my living room on Zoom with a toddler at home. And it was really nuts. I mean, everybody's story during that time is nuts. It was kind of just farcical, this idea that I was getting a dance degree on a computer and not dancing at all. I had also met another woman named Kate Seathaler who lives in Philadelphia. And we had started collaborating kind of simultaneously. And one of the things that we were working with in our work was this kind of material idea of being a mother, pregnancy, birth, motherhood. And both, in my work with Kate and then my work in the program, the MFA program, I really dove into making dance that has to do with motherhood. That took me all the way through the program. We can share more detail if you want. But this project that I shared in Newburgh in November is the first project I've made since becoming a mom that isn't explicitly about being a mom. I had a second daughter in 2022, and Kate and I did one more collaborative duet project that was called Open Open, that kind of finished in 2023. Kate has also had two babies in that time. And then I was like, you know what? I'm doing something else. I'm going to turn my attention back to this project that I was working on before I became a mom. And that's kind of what you just saw in Newburgh.
So the work that we saw in Newburgh, which we'll look at and talk about more in depth, working for you in New York was maybe a part of like an early version of that.
Yeah. So the whole project started with just me in the studio in like 2016. And I was trying to come up with some way of being in performance as a soloist that would really attach me to the present moment. That was kind of my umbrella thought. And there's a lot of thinking in dance that like, oh, dance is always in the present moment, right? But of course it's not just in the present moment. It's in the past in terms of what you're bringing to that moment, and for a lot of movement, it's in the future in terms of like where that movement is going and where it has to go based on like physics, right? So I started coming up with all of these kind of like directives for myself where like I really wanted to stop flow, like I wanted to like kill flow. I wanted to have these directives for my attention. So I came up with these directives for like, at one point I was like counting. I had to count from 1 to 600 while I was doing all these other things. And anyway, I tried all of these like different instructions, and I settled on this set of instructions that's 15 simultaneous instructions. There's a series of do's, a series of don'ts, and a series of baseline conditions for being in the work. Yeah, and I shared that with you. You did it. You and several other dancers besides myself did it as a solo, and then I performed it as and me and some other dancers also, we performed it as a suite of solos because then I was working on some other solos simultaneously. But that score was called Yes. And then I kind of went into all this motherhood stuff. And then I had always wanted to see what would happen if more than one person did that score at the same time. And so that's what I've been working on most recently was this experiment of like, what if is more than one dancer doing this score simultaneously? And just because it was true and I liked it, I called it After Yes. And so that's what you saw in Newberg was the group kind of experiment of that score.
And I do want to ask you more specifically about that score, but I just want to go back to something you said about like the desire to stop flow, and curious about what your desire is to stop flow and how that's connected to, I guess, bringing you to whatever it is that you're seeking inside of the work. Because I think, a lot of dancers would argue that like flow is that's what we're trying to find, right? We're trying to find like what is sewing together each moment, like the transitions, like the dances in the transitions, and for many people that translates to finding that flow and their literal breath from movement to make it seem seamless. So what is your interest inside of stopping flow?
I had left Brian's company and I was doing a bunch of projects and I was kind of experimenting with like my work and what would that be. And I was taking some workshops as part of that. And I took this workshop with Sarah Mitchelson, and there was this talk about the present moment, but then there was also this talk about like, she was really interested in trying to come up with these systems where the dancer could not withhold. And there was this talk about like newness, that like everything could be new in the present moment. And, some of it I understood, and some of it I was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I remember going into the studio and being like, what would that be? Like if everything was new in the present moment, like how close could I get to newness in the present moment? And I was like, well, when there's a flow from one movement to the next, a flow from one moment to the next, then like you're really kind of being influenced by what has happened before, right? I wanted to kill flow because I felt like it was like taking away from newness in like a moment to moment like perspective. But then, I was also feeling like I was just tired aesthetically of like a lot of the stuff that I was seeing and even stuff that I was making. I was just like, this all looks the same, like all of this stuff. And I'm not to knock anything in particular, but I was like, yeah, okay, so we're all interested in flow and we're all interested in breath, and this movement kind of like, it just feels like it's really repeating itself. Like it's in a rut. Like I don't know what to do with that kind of movement artistically. Like I don't know what it's uncovering, if anything. Going against flow was a way to break out of what I saw as like an aesthetic rut also. And then my approach to flow has shifted in the score, which we can talk about if you want. But at first, I was very, very stuck. And I don't know if you remember doing it, but many dancers doing it were very, very stuck. Like there wasn't a lot of movement happening because it was really hard to move and do all of these things.
What I do remember, I mean, this was many years ago. I mean, it must have been 2018 or further back, right?
2017.
I mean, I think your score did what you wanted it to do. And not only did it literally stop flow, but it stopped like the unthinking, because I remember being very much in my head and having to constantly be present so that I could ask myself the question or just keep refreshing the question or the rule to make sure that that's what I was doing, that like holding myself accountable basically, rather than letting myself just ride flow. Which is also, I mean, I think it's interesting too, because as you were talking more about killing flow, I was thinking also about connecting to breath, and how now in kind of modern day, like health and wellness and stuff like that, we talk about flow and like finding one's flow and letting things flow in your life so that you can really move through the stagnant. But this score is really generating like a purposeful stagnancy. But interestingly enough, I think too that that's just a phase that one works through and has to become more familiar with what they're doing, which is the score, and then it becomes more like not less present, but more of just kind of, why do I want to say second thought?
I think that this is true, that part of the process of creating the score was like killing flow. But then as I do it more and more, and it's been 7 years now, like I think that it just opens the idea of flow. Like it kind of cracks it open. And in order to crack it open, I had to break it from what I thought it was, right? I had to like kind of go completely the other direction. But as I continue to do it, there are ways to, it's just a constant negotiation of the idea of flow. And maybe in another 5 years I'll be doing it very differently, but there's a way that I do it now where I do find I'm less stressed out while I'm doing it. I'm still pretty stressed out, but I'm less stressed out, and it's easier for me to move. And so it's not second thought, but it's not like it's not, I'm not in like a panic mode that is like literally keeping me completely still.
Yeah, because when I said a second thought, I was just thinking of being something that's like second nature or whatever, something that you're so good at that you don't even have to think about. But I think the idea is that you are thinking, that the mind body connection remains active in every moment.
Yes.
Yeah, so interesting. This is just going to lead me into the work that you've done around being a mother, because I feel like I'm not a mother to any humans, but I do feel like there is a direct link between being present inside of the experience of carrying another human being, giving birth, and being a parent, and raising children. I think that is directly connected to that. But do you feel like those things that fed into that and then has fed into After Yes, or the work that you're saying is not about being a mother, and if they're totally different, that's fine. And then I just would love to hear a little bit more about the work that you've done as a mother.
They're certainly not totally different. I mean, like, I think one of the things that Kate and I were interested in, continue to be interested in, and then also in the solo work that I've done that has to do with motherhood is like, for me, there's like, it's less about like a narrative of motherhood and more about like the embodiment, like the issues of embodiment that come up in the space of motherhood. So, I think that one of the key questions in the After Yes score is kind of like the nature of embodiment. Like what is the mind body connection? Like, how are we in our bodies? Like, how do we process movement or impulse or presence or all of these things? Like, it tries to crack into each of those things. So, the work that I was doing, about being a mother had to do with like what is it to be the body of a mother, right? What is going on in the body of a mother? So there were these issues of like porousness has been a big thing for us, this idea that in motherhood the body is open. Something grows inside of you and then it comes out of you, and like, in order to get pregnant, you have to take something into you and get pregnant. And then, even if you don't end up breastfeeding, but certainly if you do, there's this leaking from your breasts, and then there's this idea that the baby, it almost feels like an energetic kind of a thing. Like the baby just wants to be touched. And my baby wanted to be touched so much more than I could have ever expected. Like I had what we call a Velcro baby, where like you literally cannot detach them from your body. Awake, asleep, nothing. So I just felt that I was physically, energetically, the borders of my body did not exist in the same way at all anymore. And so a lot of our work has to do with that. And so, like, okay, if you take this idea of a porous body and then you move it, what kind of movement happens from that idea of being porous? And then also, the pandemic shutdown was happening at the same time. So one of the projects I did was a dance film, which kind of had some of those same ideas, but was filmed almost entirely in my house, on my laptop, and had to do with those questions of porousness, and it had more of a narrative twist because of just being about isolation. And it also asked these questions about like performance and like what is performance in isolation? Like what is the labor of motherhood? It's largely invisible. And so now this mother who's alone in her house is also performing for no one except the camera. So now performance is invisible. It asks some more questions about like the general situation, and like there were more images to work with also because it was a film. But those questions about embodiment definitely are there in the yes that I did before that, and then are still there in the yes that we're doing now, for sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you found yourself exploring this idea of like porosity and borderlessness in a time when we were basically all asking to like create really extreme borders,
Yeah.
around our homes, around ourselves, and then to bring another human being into that. And then as you say, to have a Velcro baby and the baby not wanting to actually be is maybe not ready to be outside of you, but is and is trying all that it can do to just like move back inside by getting as close as possible. And then also, yeah, like protection, like borders and protection, the mother being the protective body and being borderless to the child, but having to create borders against the world. Yeah, it's a very poetic and quite rich, I imagine.
I feel like the other thing, it has to do with this idea of just like rigor and like demand and devotion because, I feel like the work that we've done together, working for Brian, the work that I've done for you, you've done for me, like maybe we're both attracted to this like real rigor and like this real like you're just like asking a lot of the body, and like it creates this situation where the dancer has to like really push through something and be dedicated to the task, be devoted to the task, right? I mean, that's true of this score for sure. It's that demanding. And that's true of, caring for a baby because what they ask of you is so much and it's so physical. It's so your body. So there were real parallels between dance practice and like the labor of motherhood that I found really generative and that continue to be generative for sure.
And then I'll also ask about Kate because I know you two have been collaborating as you've mentioned. Were you both dancing while pregnant and creating
Yeah.
this work while together while pregnant?
Yeah. I mean, like we started working together when my daughter was like 6 months old. And so she was in the studio in a wrap, on my body while we were making work. And then Kate got pregnant with her first baby. And yeah, we created and performed pregnant. Then I got pregnant. We created and performed pregnant. And then she got pregnant again. And our last performance, she was like 32 weeks pregnant. I mean, yeah, the whole way through.
Yeah. Yeah. And now Kate was with you in Newburgh when you performed after Yes.
I called it the maximalist version I did in Philly in the Fringe Festival. That had 6 dancers. really wacky costumes and these like visuals, these like posters made of like sparkly fabric and pop music. And Kate was not originally involved in that because, she had just had her second baby. But then, she did end up performing in that project too because COVID, we lost dancers for the show. And she was able to jump in and be an understudy. And then what we showed at Newburgh, what I'm calling the minimalist version, where like everybody goes down to a very similar monochrome color palette costume. That was Kate and Christina Gesualdi. We had some very simple musical sound accompaniment, and it was much shorter for the shared show.
So we're going to watch it, and you've not seen it yet. Am I correct in that?
I had to submit a grant on Thursday, and so I watched a couple minutes of it in order to upload it to this grant platform. But no, I have not sat with it in its entirety yet.
So we'll watch one of the performances from Newburgh. So this is the afternoon performance of After Yes at Chapman Steamer Arts in Newburgh, New York.
Are you enjoying the Dance Maker podcast? Please share it on your social media channels. Like, subscribe, leave a review, do all the things to help us reach more dance makers, dance enthusiasts, and audiences. If you're interested in Small Plates Choreography Festival, there are many ways to get involved with our shows. You can apply to present work. You can support us by coming to one of our performances or watching a live stream. And you can also support us financially. Small Plates is fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, and so your support is tax deductible. Please check our website, smallplatesdance.com, for open applications, links to purchase tickets, and to donate. Be sure to join our email list to receive notices about new podcast episodes, application deadline reminders, and announcements about new shows and events. See you at Small Plates.
Thank you so much for being willing to watch that fresh with us. I know that can be very vulnerable. It's so interesting because, I was there for both of them, and now I've watched both performances, both the afternoon and the evening. And I'm just reflecting on how much trust is required to make score-based work. Yeah, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that kind of trust.
The score is very, very limiting in some ways and very open in other ways. So when I'm thinking about casting, there's this kind of like there's the question of like visual difference, or like, the differences that people assume when they see people on stage. In the Philadelphia version, I wanted to like my goal was to, of the people that I had relationships with, I wanted to like cast people who I thought would approach the score differently from one another, right? And then in this version that we did in Newburgh, I kind of took the opposite approach. Like, it kind of was like thinking about dancers who I thought would approach it more similarly to me. And then the score itself, right, creates this, it does try to like cultivate that trust in terms of like, you're going to do what you're going to do. And then as the leader in the room in both situations, I had to really also develop practices that didn't erode that. We developed this joke that when we would be done, and like if I had stepped out and I was watching other people do it, all I would say was, I appreciate you. So then it became like a hashtag, I appreciate you, because I wasn't saying anything about like, well, you did well at this point and you didn't do well at that other point, or like, I see you doing this but you're not doing that. Like it was kind of like we all just read the score, practiced it, and then all I would say was, I appreciate you.
Yeah. I feel like there's you have a lot more to say around this, but it's interesting to me because what's coming up for me very strongly is, and this is like I feel like a very open-ended question, but just generally like in work like this, what are the compositional elements? And then with that in mind, because I think trust becomes compositional, and also the allowing and letting go of your expectations as the person who is, I don't know, like, are you the creator anymore? And if not, how do you decide if someone is doing the after yes score, if they're doing it? Because it's so subjective.
It is. And I think you can see it. I think I am still the creator because the directives are so specific and the way that they are worded is very specific. Like the language is very specific. So number one, I'm the creator of that language, and that language is generative of movement and of attention and of like a performance sensibility, basically. And in the maximalist version, I also did some other like choreographic things, like I compressed space, I had music, whatever. But beyond that, how the dancer is activated in the context of the score and how that produces movement is really up to them. It's very individual, and it has a lot to do with their training. It has a lot to do with their experiences. It has a lot to do with their kind of intellectual and embodied approach to improvisation. It's everything that they're bringing to the present moment. The score is a filter for that, basically, for that history that produces movement in the present moment. So, like, one of the key questions was, is this a set of simultaneous solos, or are these people dancing together? And if so, how do they dance together within the context of the score? So one of the directives is see and be seen. And you can just tell if people aren't seeing and being seen. Like that's pretty easy to notice. And so we had done an initial show back in June, like a very short show, and I had kind of decided that I didn't want it to be simultaneous solos, but I was still researching, and I watched that video and I was like, we're not seeing and being seen. I was performing also, so I don't mean they, I mean we. Then I was like, okay, well, what do I do? Because it's in the score. The directive is there. Do see and be seen, but people aren't doing it. So one option as a choreographer would be like, you really got to do it. And like, I think that I said that to people, but then I was like, well, the other thing that we can do is that we can practice. We started developing what we called pedagogies, where they weren't the score, but they were things that activated the things that we would need in order to do the score, right? So we had these kind of like sub scores that were only about seeing and being seen. One of the directives is don't explore. And you can kind of see when a dancer starts exploring. There's kind of this thing that you recognize, that I recognize, and I think other people that I've talked to recognize, where it's like, oh, now they're exploring. So then we made pedagogies that explored this idea of exploring. And like, we had one that was like, only explore. That was the score. It's like everything you do must be an exploration. And then we did like nothing you do. Like you're no longer allowed to explore. So like those things kind of like did the work of making things more clear and more achievable without me having to be the one that was like, you're not doing it. We're not doing it.
I see. So you've like almost installed like a barometer that is self-created. I mean, it's imposed, and but everybody has their own sort of subjective, like they create their own barometer, so to speak. Like I'll know if I'm exploring based on how I explore. Therefore, once I've experienced how I explore, I'll know if I'm exploring too much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You mean, I think the individual dancer's experience of performing the score is almost like constant failure. Like nobody ever feels like they're doing it. So there's that. But then yes, when you pull out the directives and you create situations that allow each dancer to spend more time with one at a time instead of all 15 at once, and to like trace the contours of an idea for themselves through practice, then I think that they have developed the kind of attention and understanding that they need to then go back into the score and be more comfortable with that directive.
Maybe it's an either or question or it's an all of the above. I don't know. But like what I was going to ask you is what do you desire for a viewer to experience? But also that could be said as like, do you are you more interested as like research and hearing from people what their own experience is of this very specific score?
I want people to feel like there's something going on that's different than, if they're kind of experienced dance watchers. I want them to be able to tell that something different is happening than a lot of, I think Western concert dance improvisation, like compositional improv that they might have seen. Like I want them to be able to see like something else is happening here. And for some people, that as translated to like really feeling like the present tense of the moment, to feeling that kind of like attachment to the present that we feel as dancers, to feeling that like super hypersensitive awareness of our bodies that we feel as dancers, to feel hyper aware of like the bizarreness of performance, because that's another thing that we're working with is like just the idea of performing for someone and being watched, to kind of be aware of all of these things that we're aware of in a way that feels exciting and hopefully like makes them feel inspired and tingly, like tingly and alive, and they appreciate dance, they appreciate their bodies, they appreciate the present moment, all of those things. But the flip side of that is that some people have met the work with real incomprehension and anger. Because I think one thing that the score does is that it really resists linking of things in time that creates legibility in dance. Like things aren't allowed to like build into like movement phrases or sentences or like big ideas. Like things are kind of constantly changing, they're constantly being undercut. And some people have felt really frustrated by that. Some people have felt really frustrated by the fact that that we're not together enough. A lot of the time it's really hard to touch someone else that we don't, touch is something that we've done more stuff with in the other version, but they feel frustrated that we're not together enough, that we don't touch each other, stuff like that. And there's this feeling of like alienation.
How do you meet that as a creator in your own work? Because I think some creators might be like, oh, wow, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I intended. And I don't want people to feel alienated, but I feel like you're okay with that.
I mean, I have had those feelings and I am still processing them. I mean, like we experimented with like, what if somebody's like voicing the directives like live while the dancers are dancing? And like, it just is horrible. It's just like a horrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have to be asking the question, like, what's going to serve the work? And you don't necessarily want to compromise the integrity of the work just so that it's possibly more accessible for people, but being okay with letting people sit in their discomfort and having a new experience. But it seems also to be a score that is, I mean, you're constantly like in dialogue with it. And you've been doing it for, like you said, 7 years, and it does change, and it has the ability to like evolve in all different directions, I think, which is kind of beautiful. One thing, just to speak to the specific experience of having it here in Newburgh, which I loved and was so grateful to you. I mean, both, I think, Small Plates and just myself personally were so grateful to you being open to starting the work before the audience entered the space. So everybody entered the physical building and came into the performance space, and the piece had already started, rather than walking into an empty room with with chairs in an empty performance space. They were walking into the process already. And I didn't ask anybody specifically, but I felt like it was so well received, and it created this sort of immediate like focus in on, we are here, we have arrived, and we're in the moment with you. And I think that generated a lot of curiosity from people, because they didn't know that they were going to be, we didn't tell people, they didn't know they were going to be walking into the performance. So it subverted their expectations. And I know that there were many folks in the audience, albeit, a small audience, but many folks who had not seen dance before, or not seen a lot of dance, or seen more traditional styles of dance that aren't subverting expectations purposefully in the way that we've been talking about. So what was that experience like for you in this work, in this
Yeah, I
sport?
mean that day was such a whirlwind. But I had done it as I had done that actually before as a solo, like the audience came in to me doing it. So I kind of knew that it was going to work, and I've done it as like more of an installation. I did it at a party as a solo more recently actually, where yeah, like there were people standing around with their drinks and I was doing this like in and through them. I think that it can be watched in a bunch of different ways, and it feels really fine for it to be like an installation. What's cool about them entering into the space and then sitting there is that I think this goes back to making visible the labor of the dancer, right? So you walk into this and you're like, "Oh, they're already at work." Right? And, like, that for me goes back to Meghan Frederick practice project. It's like so much of what we do is actually not performance. It's just the doing of it over and over and over and over again, right? It's the work of it, the labor of it that's often invisible. So, there was this moment of like, "Oh, we're entering into the space and, like, they're already at work. They're doing their thing." They're in their practice, like that thing. And then because they had to sit down, I really enjoyed that they were going to have a process where their thoughts needed to change from like, I'm like finding my chair, they're already at work. Oh, but this is just still happening. And now, like, well, now what? Like, now I'm really just watching it. And then it changes again with the clarinet and then it's over. So I kind of liked that series of like shifts in like the constructs around it, you know what I mean?
This is why I think participatory performance can be very uncomfortable for people, because they just want to be an anonymous body sitting in the dark. And what I loved about this, though, was that no one was being asked to participate in actively, like getting up or being touched or anything like that. But they probably asked themselves, like, well, what is going on? And maybe some of them were even like, oh my God, did I miss it started? Did I miss the show? But then also knowing that, like, oh, well, we've all come in at the same time. So like you're saying, going through kind of like, I'm just imagining what people are going through in their minds, and then sitting and watching, because it was I think we gave you a good 5 or 6 minutes. And actually the afternoon show was much longer because we had a family, small children in the bathroom. So you were all dancing for a good like 7 or 8 minutes before everyone was seated. And then we started the music. And I think at that point, if anybody was having questions, once the music started, it was like, oh, this is it, this is the performance. And it's been the performance all along. It seems rather simple, but it actually is so multi-layered and quite complex.
I don't know. maybe this is going to sound really pretentious when I say it, but in terms of like, are you the creator, and like what are you creating? Like what is the material of the composition in a score like this? I think that's actually it's the audience's thought process. You're crafting what you think people are going to have to go through as they watch what it is you're doing.
Yeah. And I would also, just to go back to something else that you said earlier about like the legibility of dance and how perhaps depending on the individual, after yes might not seem legible. My experience is that it actually is quite legible, but just not in a way that one is expecting it to be because flow is not existing comfortably. But there's a lot of flow. Like I experienced a lot of flow in the individual performers, but the flow between them is jagged. And so then whether it's conscious between the dancers or just a coincidence, when there is like spatial flow, or it could be directional flow, like just facing the same direction. Or in this afternoon show, I think at one point everybody was on the floor, you know, or two performers were on the floor and one was up, and it felt like, okay, the performer, it might have been you standing, is being framed by the two that are on the floor. Like there is composition that emerges. It's not narrative flow, and it is more like the experience of watching three streams of consciousness, and then where they meet up in parallels or where they cross are, for me, I see those as like little like nuggets of context.
Yeah, and I think, this question of legibility is still very much in process, because I think, again, like these three dancers, myself, Kate, and Christina, I think have a very similar package that we're bringing to the score. The way we look doing it is quite similar. Whereas in the last version, the approaches that the dancers were taking to the score were more different from one another. That possibly also contributed to this feeling of like tension or friction or chaos. And again, not to say that one is better than the other, but like these are the conditions that I'm still kind of like experimenting with, is like, does it just read more cohesively or legibly if the dancers involved are bringing the same kind of approach to the score versus if you have dancers involved that are bringing different approaches to the score? Yeah, and not to say that like legibility is necessarily a good thing or the thing that I want, like, because I very much interested in friction and tension. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to kind of take that out into like the bigger picture now too, because I think we do experience a lot of friction and tension in our daily lives, and there's a lot of it in the world, especially lately. And to be able to experience friction and tension in not in a fishbowl, but in a abstracted way, through the lens of performance, through the body, and then just kind of having to then sit and like reckon with our own experience of that, somewhat not passively, just less like actively, because we're being asked to be an observer. It feels like it has the potential to be possibly therapeutic, or to help us to kind of digest our own sort of feelings around discomfort with what creates tension and discomfort in our own discomfort.
Yeah, I mean, the people I've talked to more about this are the dancers, and the dancers generally suggest that the score itself and the doing of the score is therapeutic, which was not the intention at all. But because of the way that it deals with discomfort and desire, and like it has a directive that says don't justify, you're having to, yeah, kind of like really sit with your baggage and your discomfort. And so, yeah, it would be wonderful if the audience was feeling that too, creating this intense thing that the dancers are all going through, and then the audience kind of sharing that experience with them.
In a performance, like in program notes, have you ever shared the directives with the audience?
No, I haven't. And, I'm not saying that I won't, but I thought about it. I explored all of these different ideas for like sharing it live, sharing it in program notes. And yeah, I just decided not to. I just decided that I wanted to figure out how to make it more palpable in the work itself, rather than sharing the language.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about one of the directives being, don't justify. We just do a lot of that. I think that's part of like how we try and understand the world. And maybe it depends on the individual, but we kind of justify our emotions. We justify our likes and dislikes, and to be asked to confront something that's challenging or like an inner conflict, but to not justify it and just sit with the experience. And then that's that. Like that seems to me rather important. And like, what if we asked ourselves to do less
And
justifying?
And of course, I just meant it in a movement sense. Like when I wrote it, it was a movement thing, like this idea that like you're improvising and like you're trying to look great and like you know what you're doing and like you fall or you hop or you mess something up. And so that you justify it by like repeating it and making it into a motif. And so that was what I meant was like, don't justify your movement choices or not even your choices, like the movement that happens. Don't justify the movement that happens. But yeah, it can mean all of these other things also.
It's one of the reasons why it's been so nice to chat with you about the work and kind of just crack it open a little bit. I know that like for Beth Elliott, the founder and director of Small Plates, it's really important for her to be able to kind of make dance more accessible, give audiences a better understanding of the work and an artist's perspective. And so that's just all to say, like, I think this conversation has just been like so enlightening, and that to be able to experience work that makes us confront our own discomfort, make us even like go through like a series of questions, or to question our understanding of dance, to question our understanding of an experience, even if it's just like for a split second, and then to find resolution or just an acceptance. I mean, that has the ability to be really impactful for people. So I'm just honored to have experienced your work again after so many years, and to have it in our space here in Newburgh, and to talk to you. Where can we find you, Meghan? Find out about what you're doing, what's coming up for you, social media, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram with my name, MEGHANFREDERICK, and the number 5. I am taking an Instagram hiatus at the moment, which has been wonderful, but you can find me that way. And I also have a mailing list, which you could get on. Maybe we can talk more about how to make that happen when this gets shared. And yeah, there's hopefully more happening. We teach classes from time to time in Philadelphia also, that draw from our creative work and our experience in mostly release-based technique. And so if you're in the area and you want to come take class, we'd love to see you in class too. Yeah, there are lots of ways to connect.
Thank you, Meghan.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dance Maker podcast, sponsored by Small Plates Choreography Festival. Be sure to support this podcast by liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend or on your social media channels, or by leaving us a review. That really helps us expand our reach. To learn more about Small Plates Choreography Festival, please visit our website, www.smallplatesdance.com. where you can apply to be one of our performances. Be sure to also sign up for our newsletter and be the first to hear about new shows, get reminders about application deadlines, and of course, we will also let you know each time a new podcast episode drops. We rely on your financial support. If you would like to support Small Plates with a tax-deductible donation, please donate through our fiscal sponsor, Fractured Atlas. The link to donate can be found on our website and in the show notes for this podcast. Until next time, fellow dance makers, happy creating.